Thank you for coming along. Diversity and Inclusion Panel, for want of a better title. And hello. You can heckle, heckle if you like. Now then, we're trying to. It started already, isn't it? It's a very difficult thing to define this, but we sort of think of diversity, of coming up with a sort of phrase. I've written it down really. I think that diversity acts as a key to opening a door to variety within the AV industry, and that it will promote growth and place AV more in the forefront of the technology sector. I thought it seemed to be encapsulated a number of things. I mean, we've had so many silly titles and so much definition over the past month or two that we thought we'd try and start off with something we can build on and develop ideas for. And here we have a panel who's going to help us do that. They're looking very nervous at the moment, but they won't be later on. They'll get into their stride after a bit. And to my left is Amanda Eberle Boyer. Is it Eberle?
Eberle.
Eberle, I knew I'd get it wrong.
You're good.
Should have asked that beforehand. Not very professional of me, was it? Amanda Eberle Boyer, Senior Director of Member Services at AVIXA. To her left is Denise Nemchev, President and CEO of tvONE. And to her left is Sanj Surati, Digital Atelier and founder of Tiger Heart, who's looking incredibly pleased with himself.
Do you know what? I'm so happy to be here.
Are you?
Yeah, really.
Sure?
Seriously.
Is that not a sort of smile of panic and fear?
No, this is a great thing. It's a beautiful thing.
I hope so.
Mm.
And hopefully get some sensible convo out of it as well.
Let's do it.
And if you think you're going to sit there doing nothing, think again. I want some audience participation here, really, not just sitting there looking at phones.
We got a Mexican wave on the last one, didn't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I catch anybody looking at their phone, there'll be big trouble, I assure you. So there we are.
Great.
Okay. Right. Right. So, do you think that's a good start? I mean, how do you, when someone would be asking about, I've heard about all this diverse monarchy, where do you start? Do you start with the basics, or do you then start to wade in and say, well, our industry, a certain level on, and say, well, our industry we need to cast our net wider and look at many more things, and to do that, we need to change perception on so many different elements. I just don't know how you do it. I mean, you've been through a variety of things. I mean, so do you want to kick us off by saying how we should start thinking about diversity? I'm looking at no one else, I assure you, Denise.
Yeah. I'm hoping I wasn't going to go first. But
okay.
Yeah,
well, there's no such thing as it's unpredictable, as you know, sitting on a chair.
Yeah, we'll go. So I'm looking at the audience, and by show of hands, does anybody have a really good definition of what diversity and inclusion means? Oh, okay. We're going to talk to you afterwards. I know some people might be here because they just want to sit down and they thought maybe we're talking about diversity in codes and standards and video processing.
Really? You thought Prosecco was being served?
Yeah, Prosecco.
There is afterwards if you want to stay on.
Some people, this is, diversity is those latest buzzwords. What does it really mean? Maybe I should go learn. What does it mean? And thinking, we've all lived in a diverse world, and it's how we define it and live in it, and I think we're still trying to define what it is. Yeah. The best definition I heard about the difference, we'll say, between diversity and inclusion is diversity is what you see in people. Inclusion is how you feel, or how people feel within a group. Acceptance. And the truth is, when it comes to business, so say I'm a president, CEO, and I've worked, there's a whole, everybody started in their career somewhere and has lived their life to get where they're at, is you deal with people in every business you're in. And we are all different. The first is usually gender, whether you're male or female. Then age, young or old. Then maybe ethnicity. Looking at you, I would not have thought Canada, or where are people really from? What do they think? What do they believe? And when you run a bit, I see some Asian faces. It doesn't mean there's all kinds of Asia. But the fact, businesses who can embrace and engage differences and respect people, understand people, and include them in driving a business forward, perform better, are happier, are healthier. So when I was asked by Clive to be part of this panel, I'm like, I don't know that anybody's really an expert on it except for you. So I want to, what does it really mean? And to me, it means respect people, include them in whatever it is, a project, a decision, a meeting, and continue to be conscious. And I think we should talk about this a little bit, of your biases. To be conscious of how you think about people, how you think about that open position you're about to fill. When you think about a new position for a tech person or an RSM or salesperson, do you automatically have a picture that goes into your mind of what that person's going to look like? You know, are you thinking of other types of people, young, old, male, female, Asian, American? So we'll get started on this, but diversity is really about respecting all of us and having those conversations about what we can bring to the party, our perspectives, our life experiences.
I mean, you mentioned earlier, Sanj, about you've been brought up in the music industry for 25 years, and that it was never an issue because everybody was fairly diverse in the first place.
Yeah,
I mean, it depends on the environment you were brought up in, and
absolutely.
So much conditioning in a sense, doesn't it, about how you look at other people, how you look in about the culture generally, and the profession you're in.
Absolutely, really. And I was very fortunate that I was exposed to so many different, ethnicities or ages or where people are from. And the great thing about that is it educates you. You get to learn about things that you would never even have thought of, and vice versa as well. And just from my experience, I've been very lucky to kind of have that experience. But then there are stories you hear of people that haven't been lucky and who've had to kind of put up barriers or put up shields because they have to deal with the issues, the problems when there isn't enough diversity or isn't enough perspective on who people are working with. And that's a shame, and it does need to change.
Well, I don't know, Amanda, because you were the AVIXA was quite early on to this, weren't they? I mean, you formed the thing. I mean, what have you found? How did you start out? How did you try and define and develop what you were doing at AVIXA?
Well, we found that there was a need from our members that said we need to have a diversity council within AVIXA that will showcase, provide a voice, provide an opportunity for all diversity to be able to come together and talk about how it impacts the AV industry, how it impacts people's careers. So in that, the Diversity Council started after a resounding cry from our members of saying, yes, we need this to start. Within an hour of us announcing we wanted to start a Diversity Council.
So what led to that? I mean, what were they saying about the places they were in that was leading to that being started off formally?
Well, it came to us by first a board member and then several other people who he kind of talked about with and communicated with about where is the forum that we have to come together and talk about how is diversity in the industry? How are we defining it? How are we expanding upon it? How are we creating the AV industry into an inclusive workplace so that anyone coming from a student into the industry, anyone who's maybe a veteran trying to come into the industry after serving, anyone who has disability that's looking at how they can enhance the AV experience for others like them. How are we making sure this industry and this community is open, inclusive, and welcoming to everyone, whether it's LGBTQ+, whether it's gender, it's female, whether it's different races, different social economical status, different education levels. Diversity is kind of, I think, what Denise was saying earlier. It's all inclusive of anyone who is looking for a safe space to be able to come and find that work and that ability in the AV industry. And we want to make sure we're giving a platform for everyone's voice who is a member of AVIXA to be able to come in and have a voice in a safe space.
It makes me think about what environments companies think they're operating, doesn't it? I mean, I don't think companies go out to be awkward or difficult for their employees and provide a workplace that isn't, especially now, where we're spending a lot of time really analysing workplace, what goes into them, and what creates an environment that a different generations of people are going to feel comfortable and most productive in. It goes almost without saying that it's going to be one that makes them feel comfortable and welcoming. But we don't probably say that very often. Right. I'm still no wiser, even with these new environments, just whether we're facing cultural issues or practical issues or something else I can't quite put my finger on. Because the industry desperately wants new input, new people
Absolutely.
to be recognised much wider than it is for the amazing industry it is actually. And it seems to feel, from people I've spoken to, caught up in this diversity rut, one guy identified as, well, said it was identity politics. And you know how people, a bit like Brexit, you know, they jump onto a particular word and stick with it. Whereas most of us who've been involved in the industry are just welcoming just the recognition that we need to open up to everybody, and are a bit astonished, even though we acknowledge that the beginnings of the industry were very much usual male, old things in the theatre, you know, chippies and so on, inherited from previous ages. But I think we've moved on, and we're a bit astonished when we feel we haven't, or the perception is that we don't. And I think most of us don't quite know what's happened and how we got ourselves in the situation. I don't know quite what we should do about it. So, is there an acknowledgement, generally speaking, that diversity is something we should treat as an issue? And is AV feeling that? Because I can't get a sense within the AV industry, with the people I talk to, and it really is from one end to the other, what they feel about it, if they've got anything in place that's formal, that recognises it and makes people feel all-inclusive, and what the next step should be, and how we then go on. You know, it's a difficult thing to really put. We're practical people, aren't we? So we want something that, if we feel we don't want, the last thing we want to do is people not feel great in the workplace. But we want to get the most out of them. They feel they're appreciated, and you know, they want to do the great things that we know they can do. So I'm a bit appalled sometimes. We feel we can't create that environment in one. I just wonder how we can rectify that.
Well, I think this is a step. You know, it's what we're doing right now is talking about it and listening. You know, opening and just having a think, because you know there are some people that do feel frustrated but won't voice their frustrations, and you just need to be able to create those safe environments where people can talk about it and can discuss it. And sometimes some of the things that will be highlighted might not be positive, or maybe not positive, but might upset someone, or may think, oh, I didn't know I acted in that way. But at least it allows them to highlight that problem and deal with it, you know, in a professional way.
Well, and I think it's also realizing that there's unconscious bias. It's not necessarily that people are going out of their way to hold a bias against someone, but our surroundings and our circumstances sometimes allow for unconscious bias, and it's understanding what those unconscious biases are, recognizing them, and making sure you're not following that, and you're helping and providing an outlet where people maybe are doing it and they don't realize it, and allowing that voice to be heard. Hey, you know, maybe you shouldn't do it this way. It makes people feel uncomfortable. But again, it goes back to what you're saying, having the conversation, making it a safe space for people to be able to come together. And that's something that the Diversity Council is really looking to be able to fulfill that gap, allowing people to come together in a safe space to have those conversations and make it an awareness. I think the more people are aware of it, the more people feel their ability to voice it, and the more that we can have a dialogue like this.
Has anyone in the audience come up against potential, what I would call diversity issues? Have they felt excluded for any reason? Or they've had personal challenges that they like to talk about at all that they've come up across, male or female, funnily enough? You know, it's a male and women, men and women thing, I think.
We have
Kevin.
a catch box too.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
Can you catch Kevin?
Now, this is exciting. I love this stuff. Yeah, okay.
Let's do that.
Keep calm now, Kevin.
So I won't obviously talk about myself because I fit the main demographic of the AV industry, but a female colleague who works in the same office as me has really opened my eyes to the subtle sexism every day, you know, just from clients, customers who assume she has a male you know, supervisor or somebody behind her who would be better suited to serving them, you know, or have more knowledge and experience, etc. It's subtle, it's every day, it's even on the phone, you know. So I mean, that's cultural.
Yeah.
And so that unconscious bias is just, and so I wouldn't be aware of that unless she actually verbalized it. I don't see it, I don't notice it, because I live, you know, I've got the same biases from the same culture. But she has to endure that every single day.
Yeah.
And to build up, what's your name?
Kevin.
Kevin.
Kevin. you just made me think of something, Kevin, because you're like, what can we do? So I took a ride along, so something practical with one of my sales team, one of my best sales guys. And we visited 30, 40 customers during the week, and we're debriefing at the end of the week about what we need to do next and who we're going to engage with. And it's something I noticed during the week, but it really hit me when we started debriefing, as he was describing, oh, remember Tony that we met, yeah, she was that pretty blonde, over there. And, the guy Debbie there, yeah, he was the guy who had the experience from Toronto that, did this project. Oh, then there was I don't know what your name is, but, there was Debbie. Oh, yeah, she was the girl with the nice figure. And every woman, and there were like 5, and we met, which was nice for me. We engaged with almost as many women as we did men. So it wasn't that we weren't seeing, but how he described that person was how they looked for the women. And for the men, it was the experience or project or where we were at when we met them. And I noticed it, and I'm a superior, I'm the CEO, he's one of the sales guys, and I thought, now's my time to just bring it to his attention. And it was an awkward conversation. And I still think about how do I have this conversation to say, Jim, we'll just call him, I just want to bring something to your attention. And it's an unconscious bias. He didn't even notice it. And he has a southern drawl as well, so it's called them all gals and girls, and which I realize I have unconscious bias against people with accents. People who English speaking are much smarter than the people from the South. You just start realizing you're very smart.
Thank you.
Just because of the way you sound. But then I started becoming conscious of my unconscious, and I brought it to this guy's attention, and he didn't know what the words meant. And he's like, oh my gosh, it sounds like I have a disease. And he was upset that he was offending me. And I'm like, I'm not offended. And that he was warned in advance to watch his language because I might be offended, which was an awkward coaching that his boss gave to work with me. I'm like, honey, I've been around this 50 years now. It takes a lot to offend me. So even me having that conversation, but he's really thought about it. After a week, he called and he said, thank you, because I didn't realize I was doing that. And that's what I would call an unconscious bias. Is how do you describe the people you meet? When you what are those first impressions that you have? I'll share a personal one to be a little vulnerable here. I know this is being taped, but one of my unconscious bias, I'll be honest, is people with tattoos. I noticed one on your foot. It came in. And I don't know why, but at the time, and now I thought about it. My mom was a microbiologist, and as a kid, she told me anyone with a tattoo has hepatitis C. And I believed her. All through my adulthood.
I'm good, don't worry.
I know. It turns out, after 50 years ago, they started using needles, and not everybody has. But I grew up, you were talking just how you grew up.
Yeah,
I grew up believing tattoos were bad. And it took me a while to be so if people show up to an interview and they had tattoos, I automatically dismissed them a little bit. And it turns out there's an art form in tattoos, and they're beautiful, and it's expression. And so it's whether it's how people look, how they sound, and you say, what can we do? And I said 2 points I didn't want to lose here. Is you have your existing organization, but it starts with recruiting and thinking through your job descriptions and not having a predisposed notion of what that person will look like, man or woman, for any particular job. And even in our company, we find ourselves catching ourselves about making assumptions when a young woman comes in for a job. And she might be of childbearing age, and what implications that's going to have. Or if an elder man comes in, is he going to retire soon, or a woman? Yes. So you start making assumptions about people's lifestyles that's unfair. And then you start finding yourself going into a rut of not opening up your eyes and minds, and you're just making assumptions, and it's bad. And to me, so diversity is really stop making the assumptions about who people are or what they think or where they've been or how they are, and just listen and engage. And to me, that's been powerful. And one other thing, what can a person do? And as a policy maker, in your company. And one thing, and I'm happy to see one of my partners in crime here, because we've been talking a lot about this, and then shifting our policies for time and attendance, for the holidays that you take off. So a couple of years ago, we're a US-based company, but a majority of our employees are in England. And we had them take off July 4th, because we thought that was funny. End of British Empire Day. They got the day off. But we found that much of our paid time off for holidays is centered around Christian holidays, when we have a lot of diversity of people who are not Christian.
Religion, yeah.
So being more flexible with holidays to have personal time off or flex days or diversity days, you'll often hear them, I think is one practical thing to be mindful of. Paternity and maternity time off. I think flex time, people want to be included, and sometimes we need to be more flexible with how they're employed. So I just thought, that's a practical thing for people to kind of think about, is time off.
No, it's very true, isn't it? I think your colleague who recognised, talking about women's curvatures and everything else, it's just a straightforward example of bad judgment. It's what he's missed by not engaging someone like that and just dismissing her. He could have missing the most important person in the room with the most experience. He doesn't see it. That's just bad judgment.
He has a ton of respect for them. It was just how he described. And so he really thinks about it. Now, he would say, the pretty tall blonde, I'm like, she was the one that used to work for, the other company and did that one project. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, that's how I remembered her.
But as I say, age and experience acts as a barrier to learning new things and behaving responsibly. I'm the way I am because I was made redundant 3 times, and I had to rejig the clock every time I did, which makes you rethink how you think about things and act your own life and everything else. And it's a thing that we all go through, and we're all victims of our own, family conditioning, and we haven't really been taught to question any of that without become paranoid about it.
Yeah, and I think I was just getting on Kevin's point, just with how women, and men engage, and how we grow up thinking a certain way, and then you're like, that's actually a cute tattoo you've got.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's why a lot of us should lead by example and, support the team that you have. A lot of the clients we have are like luxury clients who are wonderful, but they're very traditional, very old school mentality, and sometimes very, sexist or very demeaning to young people. And it's good to get your team, we're lucky we've got quite a few female coders, to get them to present the idea to these people that aren't used to those ways of being approached before. And you have to support the people that you work with and show them that, there are people that act in a wrong way, but you're not going to act like that, and here's the reason why. It goes back to, we're talking about beauty and diversity. That's what comes back. We're all AV businesses here. Majority of us are here, because we're helping our clients to express themselves as best as possible. And so you should allow everyone in your team to be able to express themselves as well.
I think that's a good point. It also takes good mentors to help you do that and encourage your staff to be able to feel comfortable to present in maybe an uncomfortable position. I know one of my mentors early in my career, I was the main salesperson on an account, and I was pitching a proposal, and he came onto the meeting with me, and the client kept looking at him for answers and asking him questions, and he kept directing the client back to me and was like, actually, Amanda's the one that knows the information.
That's
I
amazing.
have no clue.
That's amazing.
But to have mentors like that is so important. And I think that, that there's opportunities to learn about how you can help mentor your younger staff or newer staff, or peer mentoring. There's might be 2 people that are on similar parts of their career but have different experiences that you can work with, and there's also reverse mentoring. There's a lot to learn as an older person in the industry from some of your younger teammates, and I think that diversity of thought is also very important. That's how you have that creativity, new ideas, but having a mentor like that is huge. So it's great that you're doing that within your organization.
Yeah.
You present quite a few sort of views about how to move forward, don't you? About how impacting diversity, what can organisations do, and articulating the business case and enriching diversity will drive a more successful business. Is this what companies need? Now they're starting to make business case. For my other magazine, Electronics Weekly, we're looking at probably going to be starting an initiative which looks at the best places to work for young electronics undergraduates. And part of that will probably be how they view employees of all types and how they're putting in places. So it will be, I think, more of a formal requirement for companies to think very differently about how they do it. Now, how that will progress in AV, I don't know. We're too fragmented. But, you know, we have to think about where we're getting our talent and gene pool from, and that has to be encouraged by companies who are sponsoring either engineering or AV qualification at university that give out the right messages to say, well, you know, we want your talent, this is why, and this is why we encourage you into our workplace, and this is what it does. I don't see much evidence out at the moment, but do you feel that it's going to have to go that way if we go out and try and sell to people the benefits of all this? Because we have to learn something out of this, and I don't feel we're moving forward really. We're just in this sort of general rut that no one's coming out with any solid ideas about how to push forward, you know.
Well, it's not easy.
No.
You know, we're on stage talking about diversity, and everyone's going to feel good about themselves afterwards. But the reality is, to get, you know, the optimum diversity within a business is difficult. It's difficult, and it's sometimes that can be quite scary for businesses. They may feel, well, actually, that I've got too much on my plate. I don't want to deal with that anymore. However, it's so important because, you know, as you mentioned, it can position your business in a really strategically strong place. So how do we do that? You know.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing in my view hasn't been, I know, you know, a lot's been talked about women in AV and so on, but less has been talked about age. And you know, I'm reaching a point where I'm writing about all these fantastic environments, and I'm 62. And I think, well, I've got a lot of experience, and I should be spending the next 5 or 6 years. Well, I think I'm probably deluding myself. I am really, but you know, hopefully passing on and benefiting from that knowledge. But actually, I'm thinking, well, can I take fewer risks now? Because who's going to employ me at 63 or 64? I know I've got this benefit, but how are companies going to... No one welcomes... Yes, well, this company welcomes older employees because we value your expertise. When did you last see that in a job ad? You know, all these new environments that they're created and put forward for younger people. You know, I'm not going to go around a running track, although I should be doing that actually, and playing this, that, and the other. It's very much, how does an older person fitting into what seems like a younger person's environment? And there's a bit more intelligence about how we plan these environments coming out now that I think it's a good idea and moving in the right direction. But it's actually, the more you start thinking about this, the more widespread it seems to be on so many different levels you didn't realize existed. And we don't articulate it or take it for granted. Anything. But actually, I feel quite a vulgar guy. I mean, I may not look it, but you do. And actually, the more senior you are and the more experienced you are, the more difficult it is to potentially take risks and be seen to be a failure, for example.
So it's such a great thing that you've put that on the table, because there is a real issue there with diversity from that perspective, in that the assumption, especially within the tech space that I work in, is that younger people are the future of the tech industry. And the reality is everybody is the future.
Yes,
and you know, there's so many things getting built, but there's so much prosperity in the different perspectives that are out there from different ages. And one of the things we talked about on the tech panel earlier today was, you know, collaboration is key. And, you know, more young people should be working with more older people for various reasons, because they'll you know, the diversity of them working together will help each other and benefit each other, whether it's experience, whether it's a perception, a perspective, an idea, or, you know, whatever.
Well, look at the AV magazine team. I mean, we are a dysfunctional lot. I'm sure you probably don't know us very well, but you know, there's me. I mean, whatever you think of me, and we've had 1, 2, 3 women, all of which are pretty feisty, very individual characters, and a couple of men, and we all get on. We just bumble along together, and it's a very unlikely couple of relationship we have. But I like to think that's probably a pretty good, healthy, typical. We always say we're dysfunctional. We're not really, but you know, pretty typical bouncing thing that I think is quite healthy. That we all have different views, and we rub along together really well. And I like to think that's always going to be the case in other industries where I know there's mostly male dominated or even a female dominated bias, where you don't get the right decisions being made, especially in new markets and new creativity coming along, that you know is going to benefit. You're going to benefit from hiring a certain type of person. So in a way, there's all these contradictions coming out, aren't there? That, you know, how do I bias my recruitment so I know I might get this, and then you become paranoid about the whole thing, don't you? There's so many different levels you can play this at that you have to try and come out the other end by leading by practical example and gut feel almost, really. It's a very difficult thing to label and put down, isn't it?
Yeah, Clive, you just brought up a point. So I've only been in the AV, I'm still a baby in the AV industry, just 5 years now. And before that, I was with Stanley Black & Decker. And I ran businesses in construction, industrial, and automotive spaces. So to come to AV has been a delight. I think you're beating yourselves up a little bit.
Yeah,
I have never seen so much diversity, especially here at ISE, where we bring all the countries and cultures together and ages. Like, just looking at this crowd, which might be a little biased because they came because of the subject matter, but I see more diversity, having been in many other industries, than I've seen in other industries. And what can we do practically? And it's something I'm also mindful of. Within my own organization, I think we're hiring with diversity in mind, or just that we're hiring the right person for the job. But then we forget some of that perspective and experience when we bring them in, and they start getting into the vein of how we run the company. But we've hired them to help change it. And so one, I think, practical advice is take stock of your team and engage and talk. Like, just more conversations about how you're feeling, what you're thinking. And I think it's really engaging the diversity that you have as well. I don't think we need to rewire, entire companies. In some cases, it might be. It might be progression as you get through levels in the organization. Sometimes there'll be a lot of women. I think that's worth looking at. What's the diversity at the early entry? What's diversity at mid-management? And then what's the diversity at executive? So there might be advancement programs and mentorship that you were talking about. But I think we're doing a lot of things right. And I think you're right. There's this paranoid, you don't want to offend, and I don't want to step on a cultural landmine that I shouldn't have asked. But I think once we get a trusting conversation where we can just talk about anything.
We're a very practical industry, aren't we? Where we create solutions and we do them for the right things without prejudice, usually. We might have a healthy banter, but we don't know quite how healthy that banter is these days. Depends on the generation you're from. But clearly the two things that come out are awareness and communication effectiveness. And if we can perhaps focus more on those, then I think that's probably the way to go.
Well, I think it's also continuing the conversation. So yes, we're all here in a diversity panel discussion, and this is wonderful, but it's continuing those conversations after the show. So bringing it back to your organizations, allowing your team members to maybe be part of a training on unconscious bias, or encouraging them to go to seminars. The Diversity Council is working on several continuing meetups around the globe, and the next one happens to be in the UK on March 7th. So, it's how do we continue this conversation and don't let it stop once we leave a show or we leave an event. It's continuing that conversation, bringing it back to your organizations, bringing it back to your bosses, bringing it back to your peers. And I think you're right. The more we communicate about it, the more we talk about it, the more we're all on that same page. Because no one wants to offend someone. I think that, truistically people don't. So it's talk about it.
Well, not intentionally anyway.
Yeah, not intentionally.
Sometimes I feel like doing it, but there we are. Will anybody disagree or agree with all that? I mean, any kind of sort of questions you want to put forward? It's mainly so we can throw a microphone at you, mainly. It's just purely selfish reasons.
One thing I would just like to add, I think it's worthwhile just also thinking about what do you do when a mistake happens? When someone makes a mistake, because there is this culture now, especially with the 10 years of social media being part of everything that we do, that people just want to pull out a pitchfork, band together, and start pointing the finger at someone. And it's important that people feel passionate about what's gone wrong, but how do you discuss it? How do you make someone feel like they can approach you to talk about it if they've made a mistake? Because if you repress that, you get something, you end up happening, what's happened with Brexit, the day after Brexit, all of these closet racists started shouting at each other and calling people names. And I think repression can have a damaging effect on how people's view on diversity can be a positive one. So.
Yeah, it's a really good point, that, Sanj. Thanks for pointing it out. That's a very good point. Because a lot of this is turning into sort of like damage limitation exercise.
Yeah.
We don't see much leadership going on, do we? I mean, leadership's the wrong word, isn't it? It's just behaving in the right way, isn't it? And ownership. Yeah. I mean, there have to be softer words than just leadership. I think really, it's not leaders, is it? Really, I don't think that's quite the right word, is it?
Well, it takes a lot of courage for someone to put their hand up and say, "I've done something wrong." You mentioned the story about the chap that you're working with, and you had to highlight what the issue was, and for him to actually think about that himself might have been quite a nasty thing for him to feel.
Yeah, and I felt bad.
Yeah. But it just goes back to what I was saying. It's not easy. It's important, and it has to be, done. But it's not easy.
Okay. And any questions, anyone? Kevin?
Okay.
Well,
He's got the mic.
Get the,
Yeah, exactly.
Get the
It's mine.
microphone close to your lips. Go on, just hammer into it.
No, actually, I was going to more of a statement, alluding to what you said earlier about the business case, etc. There's so much about this that's positive. We don't need to focus on, the negative side of it. So we can focus on, if you bring, say, women into a room, it changes the conversation. So in an all-male room, there is a different conversation to a diverse room, and this is the whole thing about. If you make environments diverse, it's a proven fact that diverse teams are more productive if they're well managed. So that there's so many positive messages about this. We don't need to focus on pointing the finger and the blame and that kind of thing. And I think it's more palatable then to everybody in the industry if we do focus on the positive aspects of it and where the next generation's coming from, how we can create a next generation in the workforce to be a diverse generation, as it were. So it's where they're coming from, the students. If you look back at when we've hired technicians at the Royal Society of Medicine, if you ask for somebody with experience, then you're already eliminating so many diverse aspects of the workforce because it's mostly a male pool that you're drawing from. But if you say you don't require experience, then I found it's more like a 60-40 share.
Yes, if you have clear ideas of what you like in a person, that has to be a consideration of some kind. And actually put it out, well, these are the qualities we'd ideally like, and these are the skills we would ideally like, and then lead it open to those who feel they would like to apply for it. In that way, probably, you wouldn't have to make the judgment. You would see who applied for the job.
Yeah, but what I meant was that so if you're asking for no experience, then there is a pool of, for example, women who want to be in the industry, but there's somewhere in between, there's a disconnect. They don't go into the industry.
No,
so
indeed, yeah.
Perhaps when they walk into a room when it's full of men, some women
possibly.
think, well, that's not for me.
Yeah, I'd like to think not. I'd like to think I don't have that sort of impact on women when they come in to see me. But it is. I mean, it's something men be flippant about and don't acknowledge. So it's the point, isn't it? And I'm sorry people feel like that, really. But we have to acknowledge that that's the state, really, isn't it? Yeah. Right. I don't feel as though we've covered everything, but I mean, yes, by all means.
There we go.
Oh. The guys from Toronto.
These are great. I think you need to hold it
He's
right up
all
there.
rusty.
He's
Right
really
there.
good at what he does, but you need to get it right up.
Okay, so I'm from Toronto, so Toronto is one of the most...
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Here we go.
Yeah.
Can now, we need to shout into it.
Like that?
Yes.
There you go,
Wonderful.
wow.
Speak louder.
Speak louder,
Just
yeah.
bury your face in
So,
it. Go on. There you go.
I'm from Toronto, so Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in the world. So we have no problem in diversity when it comes to the workforce. But I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate because I just want to understand where some of the things fit in terms of what you guys have talked about in assumptions and judging people. But the reality is if a hiring manager is looking for someone and you have a 65 or 68-year-old man who applied to the job, and he's great, a lot of experience, versus a 40, 45-year-old man who comes in with kind of similar experience, but not with the years, right? Reality is, he's going to look at the 68-year-old man and say, well, you know what, in a few years, you know, there is a business risk where he's going to eventually retire, or within 3 years to 5 years, we might lose him after putting all the efforts and the money and the training and all that stuff. That's just the way life is. Same thing if a 30-year-old lady versus a 30-year-old man comes in and they apply for similar jobs, and the 30-year-old lady who's married doesn't have yet kids or family, they do assume that eventually, you know, she's very close to probably planning to have children and family and so forth, and that might impact. Not necessarily it will, but it might. So versus the guy who's like 30-year-old and he's married, but it might not be such an impact to the company. Assumption. I mean, this is reality.
Yeah.
So where, I mean, is it realistically speaking that implementing diversity and what you guys have talked about, to take, like the idea is to take that assumptions out, because it's very hard to see it to be taken out when we're coming to that approach, or it's just have more of an open mind about it, or like what's the idea, or where are we trying to get at?
I can give you just
this.
these exact examples happen, you know, about every quarter, and so with the female, turns out most children have a father too, and that women in many cases take time off for a little bit of time, and then they come back to work more focused, as talented as they ever were, and are more loyal than they've ever been. And I really respect, and we're considering this as well as paternal leave, to help the mother not have to take off as much time. So I think, you know, that's where it comes to policy, and make an assumption that a woman's going to have children, because some women don't, or that a man's not going to want to stay home with his children. I know a lot of couples where the woman is the breadwinner and the man stayed home, and that's fine. That's a partnership. So I think, and if she does decide to take off time, then you make provisions. And we've done this, you know, at least 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years at tvONE, and the women have come back more loyal, more committed, more engaged, more productive, more brilliant than ever. So, yeah, for the business, you know, we had to make, and actually we were able to hire and shift around some jobs and actually promote some of these people. The age, I think it really comes down to the type of job, because you can bring in experienced people, and maybe it's in a consultation role, or it might be that 68-year-old man works until he's 80, and it might be that 45-year-old man decides at 50 he's done. So you start trying to second guess what people are going to do, and you're wrong.
Yeah. And also, you know, you could be a 45-year-old man and walk out that door and get hit by a bus. You know, I know that's quite dark, but I think
Or win the lottery, right?
or win the
Get
lottery.
hit by a lottery ticket. Or they leave to another company. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no guarantees on future employment, so hire the best talent for the job you have today.
I think, and you know, I mean this in a respectful way, I think the assumption that, you know, the guy and the lady who are the same age, to pick the man over the woman just because of, you know, she hasn't had kids yet, I think that's a sexist thing to think. That's just my view. But hey, you know, we're just at the beginning of a new frontier, a new change in people's perception, and that's the problem is perceptions. It's how do we change people's views on how people think about people.
Do you have children?
Well,
Okay.
and not to continue the conversation, but because I think you guys have said it well, but I just hired someone who was 6 months pregnant because she was the best person for the job I was trying to hire for, and she got up to speed super fast, worked until she started labor, and she was like, all right, I gotta go to the hospital, but she set my team up for success, and her part of my team up for success for while she was gone on maternity leave, so that I really don't have anything to worry about in that few months that she's gone. And I know that when she comes back, she's ready, she's focused. It's InfoComm show in June, and she has her list already ready to go for her when she comes back. But the fact that I was able to look past that and hire on talent and who was going to help me get my goals achieved at the right rate, with the right amount of attention to detail, with the driving our future goals, and look past that, I'm going to miss her while she's out. I constantly am like, oh, I can't wait till she's back. But
That's an amazing woman.
but I know that I'm set up for success. And
Good question.
yeah,
Yeah.
very good question.
That's- I don't know if
It's
it's
something
right.
that does
Oh.
come through people's minds.
Yeah.
Can I
now
just
it's getting going.
supplement. It really starts at the top. The executives of those industries, or of those companies, have to set the culture. They've got to put best practices and design hiring practices that are well known from the top to the bottom of the industry. So the middle management doesn't way off of some biases. So it's up to, like Denise's company, yourself, to build up that culture that is of diversity. So any corporation that is very diverse, it's really a cultural thing.
Yeah.
You got to, and it's very difficult for humans to get outside of to get outside our comfort level. It's getting outside. You have to challenge to be outside our comfort level to start really accepting diversity. Once you do that, it really kind of smooths the ride. But if you box yourself into certain aspects culturally or in a certain way, or you don't want to exit your comfort level, you'll never succeed outside
Well,
that.
there you go.
I think that was a wonderful question, and thank you for being courageous to be able to
absolutely,
ask it.
absolutely.
That's what.
He's
But
got
that's
balls.
What forums like this are for. It's that we need to be able to have open dialogue and conversation.
Absolutely right.
I don't know. I said balls. What's the...
I'd always ask an older man to chair the thing to do, because you always get on this team again. The younger guys just run off and shy away, but we just stand by our responsibility and tackle it head on. In fact, had I been part of a policy, I wouldn't be sitting here and I would have been employed. And there's always a thing about the sales thing, that when you come across a 62-year-old client who'd rather talk to an older guy than a young kid who's just out of college, you're going to get a big sale from the older guy who feels more entitled and trustworthy with the older guy who'll win the business for you. I mean, there are so many alternative stories to the ones we all have that, there's no right answer. It's down to individual stuff.
No, I'll tell you, my business partner is 84 years old,
Thought he might
and he's
be.
still on fire.
Right on.
Brilliant. Okay. We're overrunning a bit. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks to Sanj, Denise, and Amanda. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Clive.
you all.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having us.